I thought coming home early would be romantic. 3 years of marriage, 3 years of building a life I believed was real. I had just walked the New York Fashion Week runway for the last time that season, my designs applauded by people who barely knew my name. Instead of staying for the after parties, I booked the first flight back to Connecticut. I wanted to surprise my husband. I wanted to feel like a wife again, not just a woman who sent congratulatory texts from hotel rooms. The night I returned to our house in Greenwich, the sky was clear and calm. Too calm, the kind of calm that makes your skin prickle for no reason at all. The moment I stepped inside, something felt wrong. The lights were on in the living room. A wine glass sat on the coffee table. Lipstick smeared on the rim. A pair of delicate high heels size 6, not mine, was abandoned near the staircase and draped over the arm of the sofa like an afterthought. A woman's silk underwear. My heart stuttered. I told myself not to jump to conclusions. I told myself maybe the housekeeper had guests. Maybe my husband had thrown a work party. Maybe I was being dramatic. But deep down, my instincts were screaming. Each step up the stairs felt heavier than the last. The hallway to the master bedroom was dim, the door half open. Then I heard it. A woman's soft laugh, a familiar voice, too familiar. Nathan, what if Olivia comes back early? My breath caught in my throat. Nathan laughed. The sound was lazy, confident. She's in New York. She won't be back until tomorrow. The woman giggled. And if she does, so what, he said. She wouldn't dare do anything. She needs me. That was the moment something inside me fractured. I stepped forward and pushed the door open. They froze. My husband was in our bed with Madison Vance, my best friend since college, the woman who held my hand when my mother died, the woman I trusted with my secrets. Madison yelped and grabbed the sheets, pretending to be shy, but I saw the smirk tug at her lips before she hid it. Nathan scrambled upright, his face pale. Olivia! This isn't what it looks like. I laughed, a short, broken sound. That's funny, because it looks exactly like Betrayal. He stepped toward me. You're overreacting, I slapped Madison. The sound cracked through the room like a gunshot. Her head snapped to the side, blood instantly blooming at the corner of her mouth. For a split second, everything went silent. Then Nathan hit me. His fist slammed into my stomach so hard, it knocked the air from my lungs. I folded forward, choking, and before I could recover, his hands were in my hair. He dragged me across the floor as if I weighed nothing. You crazy bitch, he snarled. Do you have any idea who Madison's family is? My scalp burned. Tears blurred my vision. Do you have any idea who I am? He laughed and shoved me toward the staircase. You're nothing without me. My heel slipped. My body pitched forward. The side of my right leg smashed into the hard wooden edge of the stair post. I heard the sound before I felt the pain, a sickening crack. Then the agony exploded through me like fire. I screamed as my leg twisted at a wrong angle, my vision going black around the edges. I collapsed on the steps, trembling, unable to move. Every breath felt like glass scraping my lungs. Nathan came down the stairs slowly. He looked at my broken leg with irritation, not fear. Get up, he said coldly. I can't. He kicked my injured leg. The pain was so brutal, I couldn't even scream at first. my body locked up, drenched in cold sweat. Nausea rising in violent waves. From behind him, Madison appeared, wrapped in the bedsheet. Her face had gone white. "Nathan, I think her leg is really broken." He clicked his tongue in annoyance. What a problem. Then he grabbed my arms and began dragging me down the stairs toward the basement. "No, Nathan, please. Maybe a night in the dark will teach you your place." The basement door was thick steel, cold, heavy. The smell of dust and old cement filled my lungs as he threw me inside like trash. Before the door slammed shut, I heard him tell the housekeeper, "Don't give her food, don't give her water. Let her think about what she's done." The door shut. Darkness swallowed me. Time lost meaning in the basement. The pain in my leg came in relentless waves. My body shivered uncontrollably as the cold sank into my soul. I don't know how long I lay there, crying minutes or hours. Every movement sent lightning through my nerves. At some point, I reached into my pocket. With shaking fingers, my phone was still there. The screen lit up the black around me. My contacts opened automatically. At the very bottom of the list was a number I hadn't touched in 20 years. Dad. My thumb hovered over the screen. My mother had run from him, from his world, from violence and blood and shadows. She made me promise I would never look back. But alone in that basement with my leg shattered and my world in ruins, I broke that promise. I pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Yeah. A man's voice answered. Low, controlled, dangerous. My throat closed. "Dad, it's me, Olivia." Silence stretched on the other end. Then I heard a chair slam back violently. My father's voice returned, no longer calm. "Where are you?" "My husband. He broke my leg," I whispered. Each word burned. "He locked me in the basement. I'm in Greenwich. Please, help me." There was no hesitation, no questions. "Send your location," he said. "I'll be there in 10 minutes." The line went dead. With trembling hands, I sent my address. Then I started to laugh, quietly at first, then uncontrollably. Nathan Cole thought he had married a harmless designer, a woman with soft hands and bright dreams. He thought I was powerless. He had no idea whose daughter he had just broken. Less than 10 minutes later, I heard chaos erupt above me. Shouts, crashing sounds, the thud of bodies hitting the floor. Then the basement door exploded inward. Blinding light flooded the darkness. A man in a black suit rushed in. His eyes scanned me, hardened when they fell on my twisted leg. He knelt immediately. "Miss Romano," he said, "your father sent me. My name is Marco." Strong arms lifted me with terrifying gentleness. As he carried me up the stairs, I saw 2 unconscious security guards sprawled across the hallway floor. In the living room, Nathan and Madison were on their knees, held down by men dressed in black. Madison was crying hysterically. Nathan's face was frozen in pure terror. "Olivia," he screamed. "Who are these people? What are you doing?" I looked at him over Marco's shoulder. Blood stained my lips from how hard I'd been biting them. "This," I said softly, "is my family." Outside, a black line of armored vehicles filled the driveway, and inside those vehicles waited the man my mother had run from. The man Nathan never should have crossed. My father was coming, and no one in that house had any idea what kind of storm they had just awakened. If this opening shook you, don't look away now, because what comes next will be far darker, far smarter, and far more devastating than simple revenge. Stay with this story, because the nightmare has only just begun. The world faded in and out of focus as they carried me out of the house. Cold night air brushed against my face. The scent of pine trees, gasoline, and rain mixed together in dizzying waves. My body was numb everywhere except my leg. That pain was alive, pulsing, roaring, refusing to be silenced. Every slight movement sent sparks through my nerves. Inside the armored vehicle, thick leather seats swallowed me whole. A man's hands, steady, professional, secured me with blankets and straps so I wouldn't shift during the drive. Marco sat across from me, his eyes never leaving my face. "Keep pressure off the leg," he told one of the medics quietly. "She's in shock." Shock. That word felt distant, as if it belonged to someone else. Through the tinted window, I saw Nathan being forced into another vehicle. His mouth moved in silent screams. Madison was dragged after him, sobbing, her hair wild, her eyes pleading for mercy that would not come from me. The convoy rolled out of the driveway in perfect formation. The drive to Manhattan felt endless. The city lights blurred into long streaks of white and gold. I drifted in and out of consciousness, half lost in the pain, half lost in memories that refused to stay buried. I remembered my mother's voice, soft, urgent, telling me to never seek him out, to never touch the blood-stained world she had escaped. I remembered promising her I wouldn't. Yet here I was. When the vehicle finally stopped, I smelled antiseptic before I saw anything. Voices rushed around me, urgent, clipped, efficient. Hands transferred me onto a gurney. Traumatic fracture to the right tibia and fibula. Possible ligament damage. Prep the OR now. Bright light sliced into my vision. The world tilted. My father's face appeared above me for the briefest moment before the mask descended and darkness took me. When I woke, the pain had changed. It was no longer wild and sharp. It was deep, heavy, drugged into submission, but still present, like a warning that echoed inside my bones. My leg was elevated, wrapped thick in plaster and metal supports. A slow beeping sound pulsed beside my bed. I was in a private hospital suite high above the city. The floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline like a living painting. Midnight lights glittered across the river. The room was silent except for the machines and the steady rhythm of my breathing. My father sat in a chair beside the bed. Vincent Romano. His hair was streaked with silver now. Time had carved deeper lines into his face, but his eyes were the same sharp predatory green I remembered from childhood photos my mother hid away. Those eyes were on my cast. He stood the moment he saw my eyelids move. "Olivia." His voice wasn't the thunder I remembered. It trembled. I tried to speak. My throat felt like sandpaper. "How?" "Bad clean break. No permanent nerve damage," he said. "You'll walk again." I let out a shaky breath I hadn't realized I was holding. A doctor entered moments later, introducing himself, explaining surgical details I barely processed. 6 to 8 months until full recovery. Physical therapy. Possible lingering pain in cold weather. After he left the room, fell quiet again. My father sat back down slowly. "Do you know what I wanted to do when Marco told me? What your husband did, I didn't answer. I wanted to have him cut apart and dumped into the river before you even reached the hospital." My heart thudded violently, but I didn't. He continued, "Because Marco said you were still conscious when he found you, and you were laughing." I closed my eyes. "I know what that laugh means," my father said softly. "It means you're thinking. It means you're not just hurt. You're awake." "I don't want him dead," I whispered. The words surprised even me. My father stared at me sharply. "He broke your leg. He tried to starve you in a basement. He treated you like property." "I know," I said. "That's why I don't want him dead." Silence fell between us. "Death is easy," I continued. "It would make me feel powerful for a moment, and then it would be over. I don't want it to be over." My father studied me as if seeing me for the first time. "You want his life," he said, "not his blood. I want everything he built with lies to collapse, while he's still alive to watch it fall." For a long time he said nothing. Then he gave a slow nod. "You sound like your mother," he said. The name cut through me. "She didn't want me to live in your world," I said quietly. "She didn't want you to inherit my sins," he corrected. We sat in silence again. The city lights outside flickered like distant stars. Finally, my father reached into his jacket and placed a thin black folder on the bed beside me. "This is what my people have on Nathan Cole so far, and on his father, and on Madison Vance." I opened the folder. Casino transfers, hidden loans, shell companies, inflated development bids in Queens and along the East River. A pattern of intimidation masked as evictions. Money bleeding into shadows where no regulator could see. "This isn't just a cheating husband," I murmured. "No," my father said. "This is a man standing on a rot he doesn't know is sinking." I closed the folder slowly. "I'm going back," I said. His eyes darkened. "You're not going anywhere near that man." "I have to," I said. "Not as your daughter, as his wife." My father stood so abruptly, his chair scraped the floor. "Absolutely not. He doesn't suspect me anymore," I said. "Not who I really am. To him, I'm still the broken wife he can control. That's my advantage. You almost died tonight, Olivia." "And if I stay here, I'll be safe," I said softly. "But he'll still be him, and Madison will still be her, and tomorrow he'll hurt someone else." My father's jaw tightened. "I won't let you become like me," he said. "I'm not becoming you," I replied. "I'm becoming the woman your world couldn't protect from the start." The words hung between us like a blade. At last he turned away. "You'll have protection," he said coldly. "Every second. Marco will never leave your side. And if anything happens to you, anything, I will erase that house from the ground up." "You always were dramatic," I whispered. For the first time that night, the corner of his mouth twitched. 2 days later, Nathan came back into my line of sight. He arrived at the hospital alone. No Madison this time, no arrogance. His suit was wrinkled. Dark shadows bruised his eyes. He looked smaller than I remembered. When he stepped into the room and saw me in the bed, his face folded. "Olivia," his voice cracked. He held flowers that were already wilting. "I didn't know," he said weakly. "About your father. If I had known, you wouldn't have pushed me down the stairs." I asked calmly. He flinched. "I lost my mind," he said. "Madison seduced me. She took advantage of stress of work, I watched him carefully. The man I had loved once was still there, buried under fear and survival instinct. I hated that realization because it proved he hadn't changed. Only his position had. "I forgive you," I said. His eyes flew open. What I wasn't innocent either," I said softly. "I shouldn't have hit her." We both lost control. He rushed to my bedside. "You're giving us another chance." "Yes," I whispered. Relief flooded his face with such intensity it disgusted me. He took my hand. His palm was damp. "I swear I'll make it right," he said. "Everything will be different now." I smiled weakly. A hidden camera somewhere above the hospital ceiling hooked every word. 3 days after my discharge, I returned to the house in Greenwich. Nathan stood at the front door as the car pulled up. His posture was stiff. Marco stepped out first, his gaze scanning every window, every angle. Then the wheelchair was lowered and I was rolled inside. The house smelled the same: polished wood, lemon cleaner, a faint ghost of perfume I refused to acknowledge. Nathan hovered, pretending to care. He made tea. He adjusted pillows. He apologized in clumsy bursts. "I'll sleep in the guest room," he said, "until you're ready." I nodded. The moment he left, Marco stood guard outside my bedroom door. I opened my laptop. Passwords were easy. 3 years married to a man made him careless. Email archives, cloud folders, hidden financial software. I moved through his digital life like a ghost. I downloaded flight logs, hotel receipts, encrypted messages he thought were deleted. And then Madison messaged him. I watched the words appear on the screen. "She believed you." I'm waiting at our usual place. I didn't feel rage. I felt clarity. Over the following days, I learned every secret Nathan thought he had buried. Where the money went, who he paid, who paid him back. Each truth stripped away another layer of the man I once loved, until there was nothing left but a coward hiding behind power. One evening, as I lay awake in the dark, the pain in my leg pulsing in quiet rhythm, a strange thought settled in my chest. Nathan Cole thought I had forgiven him. He thought I was weak. What he didn't know was that I was no longer planning how to leave him. I was planning how to take everything from him. And as the rain began to fall softly against the windows of that house, I realized something truly terrifying about myself. I was no longer afraid. Not of him, not of his world, not even of my father's shadow. Because somewhere between the darkness of that basement and the blinding lights of this city, something inside me had shifted. The woman who loved him had died, and something far colder had taken her place. Forgiveness is a performance. I learned that in the days after I returned to the house in Greenwich. I learned how to soften my eyes again, how to lower my voice, how to sit beside Nathan without flinching when his sleeve brushed my skin. I learned how to smile with only my mouth, while everything inside me stayed cold and alert. Pain became my constant companion. The break in my leg throbbed through the metal brace day and night. Sometimes the pain was dull and heavy. Sometimes it flared so sharply it stole my breath. Physical therapy began earlier than I expected. The therapist was patient, encouraging, unaware that every step I took felt like walking across shattered glass. Nathan hovered like a guilty shadow. He offered to carry me, to feed me, to stay home from work. He spoke in apologies that came too easily layered with fear and gratitude, because I had given him another chance. When I watched him, I wondered how many men in history had said the same words before repeating the same sins. At night, when the house finally went quiet, I worked. Marco's presence outside my bedroom door was steady, silent. He never asked what I was doing. He didn't need to. My father trusted him with his life. And now with mine. Nathan's digital world unfolded in front of me with disturbing ease. Emails marked confidential that were anything but. Spreadsheets labeled with false names. Transfer records buried inside layers of shell accounts. Text threads that showed patterns, not accidents. His life, stripped of illusion, was a machine that ran on greed and shortcuts. The more I read, the more I understood that Madison had never been the core of his betrayal. She was just proof of how easily he believed he could take whatever he wanted without consequence. One night, my fingers froze over the keyboard. A video file, hidden deep inside a folder labeled with a decade-old project name. I clicked. The footage was grainy but unmistakable. It was Nathan seated across from two men in a dark room I didn't recognize. The date stamp placed it nearly 6 months earlier. They talked quietly at first, then the argument escalated. Nathan's voice turned sharp. "I don't care if they refuse to leave. The site has to be cleared by Friday." One of the men hesitated. There are still families living there. Nathan leaned forward. "Then scare them. Move them. I don't care how. The investors want progress, not excuses." The video ended. I closed my laptop slowly. Until that moment, part of me still wanted to believe I had married a man who only lost his way. That belief died quietly in the glow of my screen. 3 days later, Daniel Hart walked into my life in person. He came to the house under the excuse of reviewing some insurance documentation for my father's corporate holdings. On the surface, he was polished and unreadable. Dark hair, wire-frame glasses, movements as precise as the numbers he worked with. But his eyes were observant in a way that felt unsettlingly similar to my own. We spoke alone in the sunroom while Nathan busied himself in his office, pretending not to listen. Daniel reviewed financial projections calmly. Market exposure, vulnerabilities, pressure points. To anyone else, it would have sounded like a sterile business conversation. But I understood what he was really saying. Your husband's company is fragile. You can break it. When the stock falls, Daniel said evenly, it won't just be public investors who suffer. The banks will tighten. The partners will run. And men like your husband, they tend to make mistakes when they feel cornered. I'm counting on it, I replied. That was the first time he looked directly at me, with something like interest instead of calculation. You're calmer than most people who've been hurt the way you were, he said. I'm not calm, I answered. I'm focused. When he left, Nathan appeared almost immediately. He poured me a glass of water with trembling hands. Was that one of your father's people? Yes, his jaw tightened. Are you going to tell him everything I say, everything I do? I already told him the truth, I said lightly, so there's nothing left to hide. Is there? He flinched as if I'd struck him. The day of the anniversary gala arrived wrapped in cold autumn air. The Plaza Hotel glittered like a cathedral of glass and gold. Cars lined up along Fifth Avenue. Flashing cameras caught every arrival. The scandal surrounding Cole & Partners had begun to leak days earlier, just enough to build anticipation without revealing the core. Nathan stood beside me as I entered the ballroom. His hand rested lightly at my waist, careful not to touch my brace. To the world we looked reconciled, triumphant even. The faithful wife standing beside the repentant husband. A story built for sympathy and redemption. Inside the room pulsed with restrained excitement. Investors, city officials, developers, rivals who pretended to be friends. I recognized many faces, men and women who had shaken my hand at charity events, while quietly carving pieces of the city into profit. From the corner of my eye, I saw Madison near the champagne tower. She wore silver that caught the light like a blade. Her gaze cut into me instantly. Her smile was brittle. We did not speak. Not yet. The program unfolded as planned. Speeches celebrating growth. Gin-soaked laughter. Applause that felt manufactured. Then Charles Cole stepped onto the stage. My father-in-law spoke of family, of second chances, of strength in unity. The audience clapped dutifully. I lowered my head just enough to let my hair hide the contempt in my eyes. When the applause faded, I felt Nathan's fingers tighten around mine. "This is a new beginning," he whispered. I looked at him gently. "Yes," I said, "it is." I released his hand and walked onto the stage. The murmur that followed me was almost electrical. Curiosity, anticipation, judgment, power shifted in the air, and everyone felt it. "My husband and I would like to thank you all for being here tonight," I said into the microphone. My voice carried smoothly through the room. "This evening represents more than an anniversary for our company. It represents transparency." Nathan stiffened. "I've prepared a small presentation," I continued. "Just a glimpse behind the curtain of our success." The lights dimmed. The screen descended. The first video played without warning. Madison and Nathan in our bed. The date stamp burned in the corner of the projection. The room erupted instantly. Gasps, shouts, phones lifted high. Someone laughed in disbelief. Madison screamed and tried to push through the crowd, but security blocked her. Nathan's face drained of color. "That's not," he began. The screen changed. Bank records scrolled across the wall. Transfers into and out of offshore accounts. Casino withdrawals in Atlantic City tied directly to corporate funds. The numbers were precise, unforgiving. Then the audio played. "I don't care if someone gets hurt. Clear the site." Silence slammed into the room after that. Not shock, not chaos, just the unbearable stillness of collective realization. I walked down from the stage, slowly stopping directly in front of Nathan. "For 3 years," I said quietly, "I believed I was married to a man building something legitimate. It turns out I was married to a man building his future on other people's fear." He fell to his knees in front of a room full of witnesses. "Olivia." "I'm sorry," he broke. "Please." Cameras flashed madly. I turned back to the crowd. "This company will answer for its actions," I said, "whether through the courts, the market, or both." Behind the scenes, the first wave had already begun. By the time dawn broke over Manhattan, Cole & Partners was in freefall. Credit lines froze. A major bank suspended lending. 3 investors filed emergency motions to pull out. On social media, the scandal exploded into trending chaos. Analysts tore into the numbers. Hedge funds began shorting aggressively. Daniel sent one calm message to my secure phone. The descent has started. Nathan called me 27 times before noon. I didn't answer. He returned to the house that night, shaking with rage and panic tangled together inside him. He shattered a glass against the kitchen wall. He slammed doors. He demanded explanations I refused to give. "I trusted you," he shouted. "You destroyed me. You destroyed yourself." I replied from the doorway. Something broke behind his eyes in that moment. A crack that let the fear pour through. Upstairs, Madison cried in the guest bedroom. By morning, the stock had fallen another 12%. The press called it unprecedented. But it wasn't the market that changed everything for me. It was the clinic. The waiting room smelled of disinfectant and cheap coffee. The television murmured quietly in the corner. I was there for a routine check on my leg, nothing more. Or so I thought. Madison walked out of the obstetrics wing wearing dark sunglasses and a scarf pulled too tight around her neck. In her hand was a folded receipt. The words stood out like a confession. Positive pregnancy test. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. Her face drained of color. We locked eyes across the room in absolute silence. She bolted. I watched her go without moving. The city outside rushed on. Taxis blared. Pedestrians hurried past. Life didn't pause for revelations. But something inside me had begun to shift. This was no longer just about revenge. It was about legacy. About bloodlines and lies. About how far corruption could reach into the future if I allowed it. That night, as Nathan slept restlessly down the hall, and Madison sobbed quietly through thin walls, I sat alone in the dark with my brace propped on a pillow, the city's glow leaking through the curtains. The empire I once believed in was burning, and I was the one who had lit the first match. The truth rarely arrives all at once. It creeps in through scattered details, through questions that refuse to sleep, through small inconsistencies that slowly begin to scream. Madison's pregnancy was one of those screams. After the clinic, I didn't confront her. I didn't mention it to Nathan. I said nothing to anyone. Silence, I had learned, was its own weapon. People revealed far more when they believed you were ignorant. Over the next few days, her behavior changed. She no longer wandered the house with careless arrogance. She stayed in her room. She avoided mirrors. She flinched at every vibration of her phone. Nathan grew increasingly volatile. The stock continued its measured collapse. Banks delayed credit reviews. Partners demanded emergency meetings. Every few hours, another headline bled into the next: partners under federal scrutiny. Investors question financial integrity. Legal experts predict criminal charges. At night, Nathan paced like a caged animal. "They're trying to destroy me," he kept saying. "They're trying to ruin my life." I lay in bed, listening, the metal brace cold against my skin. You ruined your own life, I thought. You just didn't expect the bill to come due. Daniel arrived one evening unannounced. He didn't ask for permission. He simply stepped into the living room while Nathan was upstairs and handed me a thin, encrypted tablet. "Your father asked me to show you this personally," he said. On the screen were surveillance images. Madison and Nathan at a roadside motel outside Newark. Madison and Nathan in a parking garage near Hoboken. Madison and Nathan entering a private elevator in a co-working building downtown. The timestamps were current, as recent as the day before. They never stopped, I murmured. No, Daniel replied. Fear just made them sloppier. Then the images changed. 2 new figures appeared on the screen. Robert Vance and Charles Cole, Madison's father, Nathan's father. They sat across from each other in a private cigar lounge. Smoke curling thick in the air between them. The date stamp ran back 5 years, then 10, then 15, always the same 2 men, the same discreet room. My chest tightened. They've been meeting regularly for 2 decades, Daniel said. Always on the 15th of the month, for what I asked. Daniel didn't answer. He didn't have to. Some answers announce themselves by the sheer weight of their silence. That night, I called my father. There was a pause on the line when I told him what we had found. How far back do their meetings go? Vincent asked. At least 20 years. The pause grew longer. Olivia, my father said quietly, come to Hudson Valley tomorrow. The road north was shrouded in fog. Trees blurred past the windows as if the landscape itself were trying to erase the direction I was traveling. Marco drove in silence. I watched the unfamiliar sky and felt something cold expanding behind my ribs. My father was waiting in the garden when I arrived. He practiced slow movements beneath the bare autumn branches, his body steady despite the scars of a life spent in violence. When he saw me, he stopped. You're walking better, he observed. I have to, I replied. I don't have time to be broken anymore. He nodded once and gestured for me to follow. Inside his study, the scent of leather and old smoke lingered in the walls. The room hadn't changed since my childhood. Even the pale green vase my mother once adored sat on the same shelf. My father opened a safe behind the bookcase. From it, he removed a yellowed envelope. Before your mother left me, he said slowly, she was already pregnant with you. You know that part? Yes. But you don't know why she ran. He placed the envelope on the desk between us. Inside was a photograph. 3 men stood in front of a half-built industrial plant. One of them was unmistakable, Charles Cole. Beside him stood a younger man with sharp eyes and a predatory smile. And this, I asked. That my father said, his voice hardening, is Christopher Vance. Robert Vance's younger brother. The name echoed strangely in my mind. 25 years ago, my father continued those 2 families were building an industrial redevelopment project together in New Jersey. Cheap steel, illegal demolitions, forced evictions. He slid another document toward me. A forensic report, blurry images of a man lying on cracked concrete. Blood pooled beneath his head. A steel pipe lay nearby. A protester, my father said, one who refused to leave his home. My stomach turned. Your mother witnessed what happened, he continued. She photographed it. She planned to take it to the authorities. I felt the floor tilt beneath me. What happened to Christopher Vance? My father's lip curled. He died in a car accident 3 days after your mother's funeral. I met his eyes. Did you kill him? I made sure he never hurt anyone again. The honesty in his voice terrified me more than denial would have. What about my mother? I whispered. My father closed his eyes. He found out she had evidence, he said. By the time I arrived, it was too late. The room felt suddenly too small. They said she fell. They lied, my father said quietly. They bought the investigation. They buried the truth with her. My hands clenched until my nails bit into my palms. And Charles Cole, he helped cover it up, my father said. So did Robert Vance. The world tilted violently. I had married the son of the man who helped murder my mother. All the memories I had shared with Nathan reassembled themselves into something grotesque. His touch, his promises, his vows. All of it layered over a foundation soaked in blood. When I stood, my knees trembled. They don't just owe me for what they did to me, I said. They owe me for what they did to her. My father's gaze sharpened. Yes, he said, they do. The next move unfolded quickly. Daniel uncovered critical safety violations in the East River Heights project. Structural failures hidden behind falsified inspection reports. The steel supplier traced directly back to a shell company owned by Vance Industries. At the same time, Customs flagged a series of suspect shipping containers arriving under Robert Vance's name. High-value cargo mislabeled as construction equipment. The web tightened. Then came the emergency board meeting. Cole & Partners' Manhattan headquarters hummed with restrained panic as executives whispered behind closed doors. The conference room filled with men who had once treated me like decoration. Now I was no one's ornament. I entered supported by my cane, calm and precise. Nathan stood at the head of the table, his face hollow. I apologize for my tardiness, I said. As a major shareholder, I wanted to hear this discussion firsthand. The room shifted at once. Nathan stared at me in disbelief. You, he said hoarsely. Yes, I replied, through several entities. Mr. Chen, a senior board member, cleared his throat. We've received a preliminary report regarding defective materials in the East River project. The supplier appears to be an affiliate of Vance Industries. Nathan stammered, I had no knowledge of and your cousin supervises procurement, correct? Chen asked coldly. The air grew thick. At that moment, Daniel's message vibrated in my pocket. Customs raid initiated. I looked up. While we're discussing Vance Industries, I said casually, you should know that federal agents are currently inspecting one of their warehouses. The conference table erupted in chaos. Phones rang, faces drained of color. Nathan staggered back as if struck. I raised my voice. I formally propose the formation of an independent committee to investigate all transactions between Cole & Partners and Vance Industries. In addition, I move that Nathan Cole be temporarily suspended from all executive authority pending investigation. You can't do this. Nathan rasped. Security moved at Marco's signal. The motion passed unanimously. As I turned to leave the building, the sky above Manhattan burned red, with the reflection of sunset against glass and steel. The past was finally catching up to the present. That night, I returned to the house in Greenwich to find it in disarray. Nathan sat surrounded by shattered glass. Madison stood nearby, pale and shaking. Did you know, Nathan demanded. Know what I asked calmly. About our fathers, he whispered. About all of it. I studied his face. I know everything now. His mouth opened, then closed again. Madison looked between us, terror unraveling her composure. You don't understand, she said suddenly. They'll kill us. I tilted my head. No, they'll destroy you in court. Nathan flinched as if struck. The fear in that moment wasn't fear of death. It was fear of exposure. Later that night, alone in my room, I stared at the scarred reflection of my leg in the mirror. The brace gleamed coldly beneath the lamplight. For the first time since the night in the basement, something inside me felt heavier than anger. I wasn't just avenging a broken marriage anymore. I was standing at the intersection of 2 generations of buried crimes, and I knew with chilling certainty that what I was about to unleash would not end quietly, because the truth, once armed with power, rarely does. The first attempt on my life came 3 days after the board meeting. It was early evening. Manhattan traffic was thick and restless, the kind of gridlock that made even armored vehicles vulnerable. Marco drove. I sat in the back, my brace resting against the door, my thoughts drifting in dark, careful spirals. We had just crossed the bridge when the SUV appeared. Black, unmarked, too clean to be a coincidence. It accelerated without warning and slammed into us from the side. Metal screamed. The impact hurled me forward. My forehead struck the back of the front seat, stars exploding across my vision. Before I could scream, Marco was already moving, swerving hard, grinding against the guardrail, forcing our car sideways to avoid being pinned. The SUV rammed us again. "Get down," Marco shouted, throwing his arm back to shield me. Bullets shattered the rear glass. Something inside me went quiet. Not fear, not panic, a strange, hollow stillness. Then 2 motorcycles burst through traffic like ghosts. Their riders fired low at the SUV's tires with controlled precision. Rubber burst. The vehicle fishtailed, slammed into the barrier, and flipped over the edge of the road in a violence of twisting steel. Silence rushed in after the chaos. Marco reversed without hesitation and disappeared into side streets before the sirens began. At the safe house in Tribeca, I cleaned the blood from my hair myself. The cut was shallow, the bruise would fade, the meaning would not. "That was Nathan," Marco said. "Yes," I replied, "and desperation makes men careless." That night he disappeared. Both of them did. The Greenwich house was torn apart when Marco's team arrived at dawn. Drawers emptied, locks forced, cameras disabled. Madison's room stripped bare, Nathan's phone gone, his laptop smashed. The only thing left behind was silence. Hours later, a grainy street camera near the harbor gave us our answer. A silver van. Nathan and Madison were shoved inside by 4 men dressed in dark tactical gear. No insignia, no identifiers. The van headed south toward the docks. When the phone rang, I already knew what it would say. A man's voice spoke first. Rough, controlled. "Miss Romano, if you want to see your husband and your friend alive, come alone to Pier 12 within the hour. Otherwise, we'll start with the girl." Nathan screamed in the background. The line went dead. Pier 12 lay at the far edge of the Brooklyn waterfront, a stretch of rusted cranes, abandoned warehouse shells, and black water lapping against decaying concrete. The place had been empty for years, perfect for what they wanted to do. Marco protested once, only once. "You won't go alone," he said flatly. "I won't arrive visibly guarded," I corrected. "That's the difference." The rain began as we drove, cold, relentless, the kind that soaked through clothes and into bones. Marco positioned his men around the perimeter of the pier in silence. Snipers on rooftops, ground units in shadow. Comms whispered in my ear, mapping heat signatures inside the warehouse. 4 outside, 4 inside. One seated figure matched my father's build. My pulse barely changed. They had taken Vincent Romano. I stepped out of the car. Broken glass crunched beneath my heels as I crossed the empty concrete yard alone. The steel door screeched open at my touch. A gun pressed against my forehead instantly. "Search her," a man growled. They took my phone, my wallet. They missed the blade in my boot and the pistol hidden beneath my sleeve. Inside the warehouse was lit by a single bulb swaying from the ceiling. Shadows pooled in the corners, and there they were. Nathan sat bound to a chair, his face swollen blood streaked along his jaw. Madison slumped beside him, half conscious, her lips split, her eyes unfocused with terror. Behind them sat my father, restrained, silent. Opposite him stood a man in a dark coat with a long scar carved down his neck. "You're late," he said lightly. "I came," I replied. "That was the condition." He smiled. "Good. That means you're reasonable." "Who are you?" I asked. He shrugged. "Call me Moreno." The name tightened something cold behind my ribs. The Moreno Syndicate had been pressing against my father's borders for years. Drug corridors, shipping lanes, blood traded for territory. "You cleaned up the Cole and Vance mess thoroughly," he said. "Our people were impressed. We'd like to offer you an easier path forward. You kidnap my family and call it an offer." "Yes." He gestured casually with a knife toward Nathan's face. Nathan whimpered. "You let us have everything that used to belong to the Coles and the Vances. Their projects, their shipping routes, their cash flow. In return, we return your father, your husband, your friend, intact. And if I refuse?" Moreno's smile thinned. "I remove pieces until you change your mind." I studied the scene quietly. The rope on Nathan's wrists trembled with his shaking. Madison's breathing was ragged. My father sat perfectly still, his eyes locked on mine. "You planned this badly," I said. Moreno's brow furrowed. "I planned this with careful leverage." "You planned this at the wrong port," I replied. In that instant, the ceiling erupted. Smoke grenades burst through rusted skylights and rolled across the concrete. A deafening hiss swallowed the warehouse in artificial fog. Shots rang out. Shouts overlapped. Shadow figures collapsed as whispered commands guided surgical strikes. Moreno lunged forward. My pistol appeared in my hand without thought. I fired once. The bullet shattered his knee. His scream tore through the haze as he collapsed. Marco was beside me in seconds. "Targets secured," he said calmly. My father was freed almost immediately. Nathan and Madison lay cowering on the wet floor as armed men in tactical gear flooded the warehouse with light. The fog cleared. Moreno's men lay restrained, bloody, defeated. Moreno himself trembled in pain at my feet, hatred blazing from his eyes. "You think this is over?" he spat. "For you," I said quietly. "It ended the moment you touched my family." I turned to Marco. "Call it in." He nodded. Federal channels were already open. Kidnapping, attempted murder, racketeering, weapons trafficking. Moreno and what remained of his crew were loaded into waiting vehicles. Moments before the first sirens tore toward the pier, I knelt in front of Nathan. He sobbed openly now. They were going to kill me, he choked. They were going to kill Madison. Please, Olivia, I'll do anything. That's the problem, I said softly. You already did. Madison stared at me with hollow eyes. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Everything she had traded had already been spent. I left them there to be processed by the authorities. Carlson from the U.S. Attorney's Office met us at dawn. You gave us everything, he said. Moreno, Vance, Mosses, Cole, shipping records, financial trails, arms manifests. It's one of the cleanest RICO nets I've seen in years. Good, I replied. By evening, Robert Vance was in federal custody. By the next morning, the warrants hit Cole and Partners. By the end of the week, the empire my husband had inherited was gone. The official takeover of Cole and Partners came 36 hours later. Romano International. My name replaced his on the top floor. Reporters swarmed. Miss Romano, is it true your husband conspired with Madison Vance's family to financially manipulate major development projects? Miss Romano authorities are investigating multiple homicide-related accusations linked to the Cole Vance syndicate. Miss Romano, will you retain any of the former executive board? I trust the courts to deliver just rulings, I said calmly into the chaos. My responsibility now is to restore what was broken. That night, I went to see Nathan for the last time. Rikers Island was colder than I expected. He looked small behind the glass, thinner, unshaven, his eyes hollowed by the sudden absence of power. You did this, he hissed when he saw me. Yes, you ruined my life. You built it on stolen ground, I answered. It was always going to sink. Madison has turned state's evidence, I continued. She testified against you and her father both. Your legal future is sealed. He laughed weakly. Lies. I slid a small recorder across the steel shelf. His own voice filled the narrow space. Clear the site. I don't care if someone gets hurt. When the recording stopped, his face had gone gray. One more thing, I said gently. The baby Madison lost wasn't yours. His breath hitched. It was your father's. The words destroyed what remained of him. As I left the detention center, dawn stretched pale and thin across the sky. The war was over. The accounts were frozen. The trafficking routes erased. The names that once owned the skyline now belonged to court dockets. Yet as I stood beneath that rising light, surrounded by the quiet of aftermath, something unexpected settled in my chest. Not relief, not triumph, emptiness. Revenge had a conclusion, but it did not have an ending. The city looked different from the top of my own building. Same skyline. Same cold glitter of glass and steel, same restless river cutting through the distance, but standing behind the floor-to-ceiling windows of Romano International, the view felt less like a horizon and more like a verdict. This was what I'd wanted, Nathan in prison. The Cole name dragged through the courts, the Vance empire dismantled and sold in pieces. Moreno and his crew locked in federal facilities they would never walk out of. I had taken everything. And still, when the last of the reporters went home and the boardroom lights shut off, there were nights when I stood alone in that office, with my hand on the glass, feeling nothing but the hollow echo of my own breathing. Nobody tells you what happens after revenge. They don't tell you about the quiet, or the way old wounds keep bleeding under new bandages. Or how sometimes when the lift doors open and a man in a navy suit steps out, your heart lurches for half a second before your mind catches up and remembers that he isn't your husband, because your husband is wearing an orange jumpsuit now screaming at bulletproof glass. I stopped going to some of the meetings. At first, it was just one quarterly review, then another. When you're the woman who orchestrated the fall of two criminally entangled families, people assume your absence is a strategy. They don't assume it might be because you woke up at 3 in the morning, hearing the phantom crack of your leg against a stair, feeling the basement concrete pressing against your spine. One evening, Daniel walked into my office without knocking. He did that sometimes. On paper, he answered to me, now the Chief Financial Officer of Romano International, the architect of the takeover. But in practice, he had become something else. An anchor, maybe, or a mirror. He dropped a file on my desk. "You haven't read the last 3, he said. So I brought this one up myself. I glanced at the cover. East River Redevelopment, Revised Community Plan. "I'll get to it," I said. "You were supposed to present it," he replied. "I authorized it. You can present it." He studied me for a long time. "You've already won, Olivia," he said quietly. "Why do you look like you're still losing?" I wanted to tell him. That every victory was tied to a memory I couldn't detach from pain. That standing in front of cameras declaring a new era for the company meant standing in front of the same city that hadn't cared when my mother's death was labeled an accident. That sometimes when I closed my eyes, I still saw Nathan on his knees at that party begging. And I hated the part of myself that felt even the smallest flicker of something like pity. Instead, I said, "We're not done." "With the company?" he asked. "Or with them both?" He leaned against the edge of my desk, untied his glasses, and set them aside. "We've restructured the debt," he said. "We've cut off every illegal supply chain the Coles and Vances touched. We've turned their dirtiest projects into something the city actually needs. There's a park going up where they once planned to pour cheap concrete and lie about the inspection reports. You stood in front of the entire industry and told them what you were going to do, and then you did it. How much more do you need?" "Enough that no one like them can do it again," I answered. "That's not revenge," Daniel said softly. "That's policy." "Policy is the only revenge that lasts," I replied. He let out a breath that sounded halfway between a sigh and a laugh. "Come with me tomorrow," he said. "Just an hour. Call it market research." I almost refused. Then I saw the file he'd brought, the map of East River, the red lines scratched across old zoning plans, the updated sketches showing green space and playgrounds and affordable housing units that wouldn't collapse under the weight of their own corruption. "I'll think about it," I said. The next day I went. The wind off the river was sharp enough to sting. The construction site that had once been a half-legal death trap was transforming into something else. Fresh concrete, steel beams that actually matched their load-bearing calculations. Young families walking along the temporary path, outside peering curiously at the renderings posted on the fences. Children's laughter carried across the water from a small playground in the distance. "This is Phase 1, Daniel said, sliding his hands into his coat pockets beside me. 3 buildings, mixed income, a park, a community center, no offshore accounts, no falsified inspections, no bribes. You make it sound almost boring, I said. Boring is underrated, he replied. We walked in silence for a while. Do you ever think about leaving? I asked suddenly. Leaving what? This I said, gesturing at the skyline. The company, the city, all of it. He considered the question. I thought about it the first time I watched your father sign over a business he'd built from nothing, he said. He could have disappeared, changed his name, lived out his days somewhere no one knew who he was. But he didn't. No, Daniel said. He decided he'd rather spend the rest of his life trying to balance the scales. And you, I owe him my life, he said simply. Now I owe you more. The words were almost too much. You don't owe me anything, I said. That's the problem, he answered. You think everything is a debt. Sometimes it's just choice. Later that week, Marco drove me back to Hudson Valley. My father was thinner than before. Hospitals do that to people. Even powerful men shrink under fluorescent lights and machines that beep relentlessly through the night. But his eyes were still clear when I stepped into his room. You look tired, he said. You look worse, I replied. He laughed once, then winced, pressing a hand to his chest. The doctor had been blunt. Years of stress, old injuries, a lifetime spent living on the edge of violence. It had all taken its toll. There was talk of surgery. There was talk of risk. My father waved all of it away. When I was your age, I didn't think I'd live to see 50, he said. Now they're telling me I might have another 10 years if I behave. I don't know what to do with that kind of time. Try staying out of warehouses and away from men with knives, I suggested. He smiled faintly. Did you find it? He asked. It took me a moment to understand. The diary, I swallowed. Yes, and the film hidden under the floorboard, I said. Just like Mom wrote. I had spent an entire night in his study after that. Bare hands prying up old wood heart, pounding with something like fear and longing combined. The metal box had been there, rusted but sealed. Inside reels of film, a few photographs, and a letter addressed in my mother's unmistakable handwriting. To my daughter, if you ever find this. I hadn't been ready to read the rest right away. What will you do with it? My father asked. Turn it over, I said. The prosecutors have enough to bury Vance and Cole for what they did to me. But what they did to her, that deserves daylight too. His eyes glistened. I failed her, he said quietly. You failed yourself, I replied. She knew who she married. He looked at me sharply, then nodded once. Don't become me, Olivia, he said. You built something different. Don't let the old world drag you back down. I won't, I said. I wasn't entirely sure it was true. The line between justice and cruelty had blurred more than once in the months leading up to that moment. I had watched men fall that I did not pity. I had watched others fall who might have walked away years earlier if someone had given them a map out. The next phase of Romano International forced me to confront that line. The capos gathered in a conference room that used to host quarterly earnings calls for criminally creative real estate ventures. Now it smelled like new carpet and fresh legal doctrine. These men had been my father's lieutenants. They'd enforced rules the world never saw. They'd made threats, carried out orders, collected debts. They'd also kept their mouths shut when it mattered, and stood between my family and bullets more times than I would ever know. I stood at the head of the table in a black suit, no jewelry, No makeup except the thin line of eyeliner that made me feel less naked under harsh lights. Things are changing, I said. You all know that. You can either change with them, or you can disappear before they run you over. They watched me closely. We will dissolve every illegal operation connected to this name, I continued. Extortion, trafficking, smuggling, protection rackets, all of it. A few faces tightened. In their place, I said, we are building something that can exist in the sunlight. A security and investigations firm, risk management, legal corporate surveillance, political vetting, high-end protection that doesn't involve breaking anyone's kneecaps. One of the older men, Salvatore, who had known me when I was small enough to sit on a bar stool and drink orange soda while deals were whispered in the back room, cleared his throat. And if we say no, he asked. If you say no, I said calmly, you can take a retirement package and walk away. I won't chase you. And if we refuse both, another man muttered. I slid a thick binder onto the table. Every page was a record. Transactions, conversations, photos. Enough to keep any prosecutor full for years. Then you can explain this to the federal grand jury, I said. I'm sure they'd love to hear your side. It wasn't a bluff. No one called it. By the end of the week, contracts were signed. Some left quietly eager to fade into obscurity with more money than they deserved. Others stayed reshaping their loyalty into something new. Romano's security and risk didn't erase the past. Nothing could. But it changed the direction of the future. Back in the city, Daniel took me to the top floor of our building one rainy afternoon. The space was empty. Bare walls, raw concrete windows fogged with mist. This could be anything, he said. It was going to be another executive lounge, I replied. Your idea. I hate executive lounges, he said. No one needs a private bar on the 42nd floor when there's a public one downstairs. I had a different thought. He pulled a folded sheet from his pocket and handed it to me. Library layout, children's section, study tables. Reading nooks built into the windows with cushions overlooking the Hudson. Quiet rooms, a small gallery space. At the top of the drawing he had written a name. Lily Davis Children's Library. My mother's name. My throat tightened. Kids from the East River Project will need somewhere to go after school, he said gently. Somewhere that isn't a half-finished construction site. Daniel. We can fund literacy programs, he went on. Scholarships, workshops. Use the money they once made by lying to the city to help the kids who were supposed to be collateral damage in their projects. I stared at the paper until the words blurred. Say something, he murmured. I folded the page carefully. Yes, I said. He smiled. It was small and real, stripped of his usual reserve. A few weeks later, he asked me to marry him. There was no elaborate spectacle, no orchestra, no rooftop with fairy lights, no carefully staged photos, just the two of us. In my office late at night, the city spread out below like a broken circuit board, stacks of documents between us. He slid a small ring box across the desk. You don't have to open it, he said. You can slide it back if you want. Nothing between us changes either way. I'll still work for you. I'll still argue with you. I'll still tell you when you're wrong. That's a terrible proposal, I said. It's an honest one. I opened the box. The ring was old, delicate. Not the kind of diamond you'd see in glossy advertisements. It looked like something that had survived stories. It was my grandmother's, he said. She told me to give it to the woman who could help me end the history our families were trapped in. I thought she was being dramatic. Now I'm not so sure. Your family too, I asked. We all have ghosts, he replied. You're just better at dragging yours into the light. The question wasn't hard. It was terrifying, which is how I knew the answer mattered. Yes, I said, on one condition, name it. We do this right, I said. No secrets between us that rot from the inside out. No empires built on somebody else's grave. We walk away the second we start to look like them. Deal, he said. Our wedding was small, no newspapers, no industry gossip. Just a quiet ceremony in a church in Brooklyn Heights where the stained glass windows didn't know or care that half the guests had at one time or another broken laws in 3 different states. My father walked me down the aisle. He moved slower now, his hand heavy on my arm. But his back was straight. When we reached the front, he didn't look at Daniel. He looked at me. You did better than I did, he said, his voice rough. That was the plan, I answered. I tied my mother's pearl brooch to my bouquet. For once, the weight felt less like grief and more like witness. On our honeymoon, somewhere between time zones and hotel rooms that all smelled faintly of detergent and fresh bedding, I woke in the middle of the night with a strange certainty. I took a test in a bathroom that wasn't mine. 2 lines appeared. My heart beat against my ribs in a way I hadn't felt since the night at the Plaza Hotel when I walked onto the stage knowing I was about to detonate a life. Only this time, I wasn't destroying something. I was beginning it. Daniel found me sitting on the floor, the test in my hand. He didn't say anything at first, just sat down beside me, shoulder against mine. I'm pregnant, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. His hand found mine without hesitation. If it's a girl, I continued, I want to name her Lily. He closed his eyes for a moment. Then we'll give her a world your mother would recognize, he said, not the one she had to run from. We sat there in silence, the bathroom fan humming quietly overhead. I thought about my mother, about the film in the box under the floor, the letter, the choice she made to leave my father, so I could grow up outside his shadows, only to watch me step back into them years later for my own reasons. Revenge had brought me here. Justice had to carry me beyond it. Months later, when I walked into the finished Lily Davis Children's Library on the top floor of Romano International, the sound that greeted me was not the echo of my own heels, but pages turning, laughter, a gentle hush as a volunteer read to a circle of kids from East River who sat cross-legged on the floor, leaning forward, eyes wide. My daughter kicked once inside my ribcage as if in response. I rested my hand over the movement and watched the late afternoon light spill across the shelves. I had taken so much, but in that moment, for the first time, I felt the shape of what I had given back. No one will ever fully understand what it costs to break a cycle like the one I was born into. To look at a man who broke your body and say, prison is enough. To look at a father who once ordered deaths and say, you've done harm, but you're trying to do something else now. I'll meet you halfway. I still dream sometimes of staircases, of basements, of flashes of silver silk on a half-lit bed. But when I wake, there is a man beside me whose first instinct is not to control but to ask, "Are you okay?" There is a father still fighting his own ghosts. There is a library full of children turning pages instead of becoming the background to somebody's development deal. There is a company whose name once made people whisper now printed openly on community grants. And there is a life growing inside me that will never have to find her mother at the bottom of a file labeled accidental fall. I married the son of the man who helped kill my mother. I survived him. I destroyed the world that made him. But more importantly, I used its ruins to build something else. That, in the end, is the only revenge I am willing to keep.